Hey y'all, welcome back to Dots and Beyond. I'm Beth. Today we are setting up my son's custom bullet journal for 2024, and we are going back to the Magnus archives. Let's go ahead and get started. These are the front end pages of Kenny's journal for this Magnus Archives setup. This journal is from Archer and Olive. We always shop the Halloween collection for his journals. He absolutely loves them. I do have a discount code for you for Archer and Olive. It's DMB10, D&B10. I will link it down below if you want to go shop any of their particular journals. Now, as you can see, I have gotten a head start, because if I hadn't, we would have been here for hours and hours. I've gone ahead and pasted in some dark colored paper and some green torn paper that I had lying around. The black paper comes from a Scribbles That Matter notebook that I've just been filtering pages out of. The green paper comes from an Archer and Olive notepad. I have gilded it with gold paints. You'll see the paints recur here in a little bit as well, and we are going to make a really big splash page for this setup. You're also going to see me use just a ton of supplies and sometimes switch supplies in the middle because something's not working and I have to switch to something else. I will make every effort that I can to link everything down below. I am using some Posca paint pens in this particular setup, the black and the white, because that's what I need to do these bookshelves that I'm going to do on this splash page. This piece of Kraft paper came from the same notepad that this green paper came from. Again, it was from Archer and Olive. I have gilded those, like I said, to match this gold on the cover. And I have a little eraser there just to support that left side of the journal that wants to lean towards the desk because it's so brand new. But this Kraft paper I'm going to use just to protect my edges, make sure I don't have anything bleed through. We are going to start by crafting an inside view of the Magnus Archives. And as an archives, it very much in my head resembles a library. So we have both books as well as boxed storage areas for artifacts that arise through the course of the Magnus Archives. So I am sketching in a black bookcase with white books on one side and a white bookcase with black books on the other side. I definitely wanted to have that juxtaposition between the two. Now, those of you who've been around for a minute, right, remember that we did a Magnus Archives setup for October 2022 in my son Kenny's journal for Halloween. It is one of his favorite fandoms, and we are going all in 2024 on this theme. For the rest of you, what is the Magnus Archives? Produced by Rusty Quill, the Magnus Archives is a captivating podcast that delves into the mysterious and supernatural. The series follows the character of Jonathan Sims, who works at the Magnus Institute, an organization dedicated to investigating paranormal occurrences. Each episode is presented as a cassette tape audio recording of a statement given to the Institute, recounting a personal encounter with the supernatural. These statements vary from eerie encounters with strange entities to unnerving experiences that challenge the boundaries of reality. As the series progresses, a larger narrative unfolds, weaving together the individual stories into a complex and interconnected web of horror. The podcast masterfully combines elements of horror, suspense, and mystery, keeping listeners on the edge of their seats. The atmospheric sound design enhances the immersive experience, making it feel like you're right there with the characters as they confront the unknown. What sets the Magnus Archives apart is its ability to create a sense of unease through subtle storytelling and a gradual buildup of tension. Themes of fear, identity, and the unknown are explored in depth, making it a thought-provoking and intellectually stimulating listen. The Magnus Archives quite literally preys on our base human fears. These fears form the core of the Magnus Archives narrative, each contributing to a chilling and intricate exploration of horror and human psychology. The Buried, an entity that embodies confinement and entrapment, causing individuals to be buried alive or stuck in claustrophobic situations. The corruption, representing decay and perversion. It drives people to engage in destructive and corrupt acts, spreading a sense of moral decay. The dark, a fear of the unknown, darkness and the absence of light, invoking terror through what can't be seen or understood. The desolation, focused on destruction and annihilation, it thrives on acts of violence, arson, and the wanton destruction of all things. The end, embodying mortality and the inevitability of death, it manifests in various forms, reminding individuals of their own mortality. The eye, a symbol of surveillance and the invasion of privacy, it observes and collects information, instilling paranoia in those who feel its gaze. The flesh, reflecting body horror and the loss of bodily autonomy, it induces grotesque transformations and mutilations. The hunt, a predatory force that revels in the pursuit and torment of its prey, causing fear through relentless pursuit and violence. The lonely, signifying isolation and solitude, it creates profound loneliness and a sense of being cut off from others. We're going to come back to the fears, but right now I need to set this journal off to the side and let this green spooky recording of a voice dry while we move on to something else. And this is where we are going to combine two of Kenny's fandoms together. Behind this piece of paper, I do have a large printout of a Luna moth. This is one of the rare instances where I have traced this moth onto some dot grid paper, and we're going to then color her and put her in the journal. These are the 3 colors that Kenny has picked out. 2 of these are Tombows that I'll link down below. The middle color green is a dual tip brush pen from Amazon Basics. Now, why the moth? Well, first, we have a moth on the front of this cover, and it definitely resonated with Kenny. Second, we are going to name the journal after a moth character from another fandom. More on that in a little bit. And third, he wanted to have a moth element interwoven through the journal from the beginning of the journal to the end of the journal. So we are going to see some moth imagery somewhere all year long. This is going by super fast, but trust me, recreating this moth even a little bit closely was one of the longest parts of this setup. You see, I did detach it eventually from the trace paper and move on to just finishing it off myself. Here I am writing in the colors of those Tombows, or the 2 Tombows, and then the 1 Amazon Basics that I am using. And we are going to blend these together. The middle of the moth is going to be a little bit darker of a color. The edges of the wings are going to be a little bit lighter of a color. And this has to be done section by section. I can't color everything that I want to be light green, and then blend it into the middle color. You got to do it while it's a little bit damp and wet in order to blend those 2 things together. Here I am coloring that moth so that we can cut her out and get her pasted into the journal. While I'm doing that, I think I have time to tell you about the last 3 fears from the Magnus Archives. The slaughter, which is focused on indiscriminate violence and bloodshed. It invokes fear through brutal and chaotic acts. The spiral, a distortion of reality inducing confusion and madness through twisted and surreal experiences. The stranger, representing the unfamiliar and the unsettling. It causes disorientation and fear through encounters with the strange and unknowable. Whether you're a fan of horror or just enjoy a good spine-tingling story, the Magnus Archives is sure to leave you intrigued and craving the next statement. And I can attest to that because the boy got me involved in listening to all 200 episodes. It's a journey into the paranormal that's both chilling and intellectually satisfying, making it a must-listen for those who appreciate a well-crafted and immersive narrative. Alright, I am going to carefully cut around our moth. We're going to bring back in the journal, and we are going to get her pasted into this big area on the left side. And that is how brilliant and pretty she looks Kenny specifically wanted these bright green colors, and now we're ready to go ahead and do the name of this particular journal. Now, this first try that I do doesn't work. This gold stamp pad from Archer and Olive is a little bit on the older side, and it has worn out on me, so this doesn't show up on the dark very well at all. It actually shows up as almost a black. As you see that I try to stamp this in here, I decided to redirect my efforts and paint over it, and I still didn't like the way that it looked. And eventually I am going to come up with a different plan, but I do let myself live with the gold paint for just a little bit while I determined what my next steps were going to be. So I went ahead and moved on to coloring in our tape recorder. If you were listening to the description in the Magnus Archives, you know every episode is told on cassette tape. And so I definitely had to get a tape recorder element on here. This is an old tabletop tape recorder for you youngins who have never seen one. It just sits on the table and it's got buttons you press for play and pause and forward and rewind. And we used cassette tapes for those. Coming back to that name, and I have decided to take a small piece of dot grid paper. I'm going to stamp the name of this journal on this paper, tear around the edges, and paint those edges gold, and then paste it into the journal. And the name of this particular journal, based off of the name of a Moth character, is Savathun. Savathun is a character from Destiny, the video game, and this is where our fandoms merge with Destiny and the Magnus Archives. Once Kenny saw this journal and knew that it was going to be his, Savathun was the name that had been floating around in his noggin, just waiting to be applied to this particular setup. Now that I have it torn and the name stamped in, we do have to gild the edges to make it match all of the other torn edges in this setup, which are all gilded as well. And once corrected and put into place, y'all, I like this version way better than anything that I had in my head originally. I like bringing in that white from the right side to this side. Now, it's been another day or two because of my COVID situation. As you can see, we've added some things to this page in addition to the name. I've put in some stars and some gold sparkles to liven it up. I have also gilded with the gold paint every single one of these books instead of just having the gold gel pen on it to really make it shine. Moving on, and we are turning to the page that is where the pages are glued to the book binding. Sometimes I take this page and glue it to the other one to get it out of my way. This time we're just going to use it, and this page on the left is solid white. It doesn't have the dot grid on it. It took me a little longer to sketch out things that I wanted to put on this page. In order to separate these a little bit, I have run my nail down that binding just to split the glue a little bit. You don't want to do it too much, your journal will start falling apart. On this left side, we are going to put Kenny's key, and the Magnus Archives does have a physical location. It is a mansion type row house situation in London, and I didn't really want to draw row houses. It also has within it a recurring creepy mansion that is referred to over and over, so maybe this is that particular mansion in the Magnus Archives. But it is seated atop a box that will be for Kenny's key. I am leaving the box empty so he can fill his key in himself. On the left side, we have an old key with an owl in the middle of it, and that is very much one of the images that comes along with the Magnus Archives, and the Rusty Quill who produces it is this owl. And I'm going to use some of the same markers from our Moth coloring to fill in a few little tidbits on this page as well. And then you're going to see the stamp pad and the alphabet stamps quite a bit in this setup. In this page, I'm using them to stamp in the phrase "statement begins," because that is how most of the episodes of Magnus Archives begin, and they all have a case number. So in this case, I have made the case number 0002024 for 2024. So case number 0002024, statement begins. And then I always like to sneak in a quote on both his annual and his monthly setups that he doesn't know is coming. I pick them out myself. And this is again where the fandoms are colliding because the internet tells me, I don't know for sure because while I've watched him play Destiny, I don't necessarily pay full attention, that this is a quote by Savathun. And strangely enough, it could very much have come directly out of the Magnus archives as well. It totally fits the vibe. That quote is, "Who decides what is true in this universe of light and dark? There is no greater power." I started off the design with a larger stencil to give us a little bit of variety, although the letters are a sans serif in the very same style as the alphabet stamps. And then we are just adding in some additional touches. So for true, I used the same green markers. In light, I actually did go over it with a white gel pen to cover up the dots. Dark, obviously, I just filled that in with black. And then we're going to add in the rest of the quote with the alphabet stamps. Now that I'm editing, I do realize that I forgot his ampersand between light and dark, and so I'm going to have to go back in and fix that and put that in as well. The last touch we have on this page is to add in one of our moths. This sticker sheet came in the Archer and Olive Halloween box for 2023. The moths go with the theme. It's making it a little bit easier on me because then I only had to draw the one very large Luna moth. And throughout the rest of this setup, I can stick these little moths in where I need to highlight a moth element. That will wrap up his key and his quote page, and we are ready to move on to a staple in the bullet journaling community, and that is the future log. And we really debated whether Kenny wanted these in his journal. He does some things digitally like I do as well. And we decided he wanted one, but we could knock it down to one spread instead of two, because he really just needs to highlight things like birthdays and those sorts of things. I also made a whole lot of these mini calendars in advance, and we are just going to toss them up in the air and with editing magic, go ahead and stick them in. Once those are in place, I thought it would be just a little bit different to add some ruled lines to the future log as opposed to just leaving the dot grid. Give your eye a little something else to look at. This is a very, very light gray Pigmamicron that I am using to make those lines. And I'm just going to add in 5 for each of the months, with the exception of December, where our artwork gets a little close, and that one just has 4 lines, but it will be fine. For the artwork on this page, I'm going to draw in an actual cassette tape instead of the cassette tape recorder, and then add back in that element of the painted green smoky voice coming out of the tape. And again, for this, I'm going to use the Posca markers for me to draw on this black paper as well as a white gel pen. Then come back in and fill it in with that green paint. Now that green paint that I am using is gouache. I've had just a regular green. I mixed it with some metallic white and some silver just to give it a little extra shimmer. And then I also added in some of that white pearlescent gold that's all the way down at the bottom on that gold palette as I was painting, just so it looks like it has a little bit of a pearlescent swirl and shimmer to it. That doesn't necessarily pick up on camera, but you can see it in person. It does have sort of that ghosty element to it. And then I'm going to finish it off with another of our moth stickers. This time I am going back to the Luna moth that is in this Archer and Olive set. We're going to put that there on the left side, add in some stars and sparkles, and we'll be ready to move on to the next spread. This is the 4th bullet journal that I'm setting up for Kenny. The first one was very much a surprise. I set up the entire year all at once, but we are getting good at narrowing down what annual pages work for him, what he wants in his journal versus what he doesn't need in his journal. And on this page, we are going to set up a page of goals or intentions, and it's going to be a super simple setup. 6 columns, 1 for life area, and then very much in the style of Sterling Ink, we'll have a column for his 1-year goal, half-year goal, quarterly, weekly, and then the daily breakdown. And then he has 5 rows to put 5 life areas, 5 goals, or he can put 2 per box. Whatever works best for him in those particular areas. He did not want me to define those areas like work, relationships, whatnot. He wanted to figure those out for himself. but he also specifically requested we use the word intentions and not goals. On the top of this page for artwork, I am putting some file boxes or evidence boxes. There are things in the Magnus archives, artifacts that are collected along the way that have supernatural value, and I'm actually going to put real Magnus archives case numbers on these file boxes, and I think most of them, with maybe the exception of the last one, are actual case numbers that coordinate with a specific artifact. Some of those artifacts are mentioned in multiple episodes, but at least one of those is going to be listed on the particular box, like the item is in the archives in that box. And then again, to finish it off, we're going to add in another Moth sticker because we have them and they're helping me out with this very lengthy setup that took 8 hours. I guess when I decided I wasn't going to do a creative bullet journal for myself, I poured every ounce of that creativity into making sure that I got this setup so perfect for him that I knew he was just going to love every single page, and he does, and I'm very happy for that because the Magnus archives are so important to him as a fan. I don't know how many times he's listened through now, probably 5 or 6. He can name specific episodes and what happened in that episode, and some resonate with him more than others, but he definitely knows what's going on all of the time. This next spread encompasses 2 pages that he asked for as we were getting close to the end of 2023 in his journal, and I kept meaning to set it up like in the back so he could actually start using it, and I didn't do that. Of course, he could have just written it in without any artwork and set it up himself. But on the left side of the spread, we're going to do a when did I last or an adulting. This is one of those places where you can write down an item like changing your toothbrush, the area of life that it goes with, hygiene, and the last time you did that date, or changing your oil or rotating your tires, or whatever those things may be. He specifically asked for the when did I last page. On the right side, he also asked for a need and a want list. So that is what we have here. We have need on the right, want on the left. And as far as the artwork goes on this particular page, the original Magnus Archives artwork had a cassette tape and like a skull and a quill. So I've put the skull and the quill here on this page. We're also going to add in another Luna Moth, as well as some sparkles and things here and there, and that is a fairly easy setup for the when did I last page, as well as that need and want list. And of course, we have these green bits and black bits of paper that I had stuck in advance with the torn edges that are gilded. And that brings us to the final spread in this setup that Kenny has asked for 2024. We're calling this the Explore list. Essentially, it is a list of recommendations, things that he can watch, listen to, read, all of those sorts of things. So we have 4 sections: read, listen, watch, and eat. Each one of those sections is going to get its very own icon. For read, we are going to use a file folder like you're reading a case file. For watch, I'm going to use an eye because Kenny has the eye imagery and the eye is very big in the Magnus archives. For listen, I'm drawing yet another tiny cassette tape down here in the left corner. And for eat, I'm just going to put in a gold coffee cup because the boy loves coffee and he's a barista. And that is one of those things he wants to explore this year, is other restaurants and things here in Little Rock. At the top of this page, we are going to do a book shelfie as our artwork, and that's because one of the most important parts in the Magnus archives we have not yet discussed is the collection of the Leitner books. Jürgen Leitner was a former member of the Magnus Institute, and he created a collection of books that contain knowledge about various entities, rituals, and the supernatural phenomenon. Reading or possessing these books comes with inherent risks. Individuals who interact with the Leitner books may be affected by the entities they describe, leading to various supernatural and often horrifying experiences. There are also a range of other books that are mentioned in the Magnus archives, so I put those names on the spines of the books, as well as having some of those Leitners filtered in the mix. We have A Disappearance, Ex Altiora, Book of Astronomy, A Guest for Mr. Spider, Dig, Dictionnaire Infernal, Key of Solomon, A Journal of the Plague Year, The Stalwart Hunter's Almanac, Security Camera Introduction Module, Slaughter Book, An Introduction to Higher Anatomy, Book of the Dead, Sanskrit Poetry, The Seven Lamps of Architecture, Memory Book, The Tale of a Field Hospital, Catalog of the Trapped Dead, and The Travels. Jürgen Leitner's character and his creation, the Leitner books, add layers of complexity to the Magnus Archives' exploration of the supernatural, as do some of the other books that are also mentioned in the series. The presence of these books introduces a sense of danger and intrigue as characters grapple with the consequences of delving into forbidden knowledge. That will wrap up Kenny's Explore/Recommendations page, and we are ready for our final flip through of this very lengthy and very involved artistic bullet journal setup. But I do absolutely love how we have tied in this journal with the Moth cover and created a combination of two of his favorite fandoms, Destiny as well as the Magnus Archives, though mainly the Magnus Archives. If you made it this far in the video, leave us a moth or an eye emoji so that we know that you were here. If you are also a fan of the Magnus Archives and you are looking forward to us exploring this in 2024, sound off in those comments as well. And if you are not a podcast listener or fan of spooky stories, just know that we are going to explore those fears that I listed in the beginning of this video throughout the course of 2024. Can you guess what we're going to start with in January? I know this was a long one, and I very much appreciate y'all sticking with us through this one. While this is the fourth journal that we have done for my son Kenny as a custom bullet journal, this is the first one that he has selected sort of an overarching annual theme, as his mom tends to do with hers. And I am very much looking forward to hopefully bringing them to life for him. Now, if you liked this video, you know what to do. Y'all go ahead and please give me a big thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will catch you in the next one.